Welcome, everybody. It's the Patient Toddler coming at you with another live stream format. It's all around the red circle called ARC. And I am very glad that I have on my channel 3 familiar faces for you. And I think we can start out on the top right. You find the old rhubarb, Corey.
Hello.
That produces the must-go-to before drop ritual videos with a lot of input, with a lot of information. So I'm very happy to have you here giving your input today.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bottom right, we have Sleep in Comics, probably one of the most known channels of the comics in the Veve space. Yeah. But just a guy in the basement. And as he always says, and hopefully not the evil version today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
And right below me, we have giant-sized comics. Giant-sized comics on the wall. One of the, I believe, newer members in Veve, also in the YouTube scene, but with some very exciting stuff and information on his channel. So yeah, welcome. Very glad to have you here.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh man, that it is actually for me a dream coming true to have you all here.
Goodness.
And Corey for the second time, so I'm very happy to have you here. Let's do some housekeeping stuff before we jump into the really good stuff. So as you all guys know, you know the drill. Nothing of what we are saying here should lead you to any FOMO actions. Although it could happen, please keep in mind that we are not giving out financial advice. So all the comics that we are talking about here is pure from a collector's perspective, what we like to collect. So keep that in mind, and also make sure, and we will look at your channels as well, but make sure to follow all these 3 guys here on YouTube so that you don't miss out on information on the comics anymore in the future. And also, we are already 20 people here. So make some noise for the algorithm, smash the like button. That's the most important thing. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe. And well, with that said, let's start into our topic because we are here to talk about comics, the comic NFT side on the Veve app. And well, maybe we'll start out with the obvious. So you have all been physical collectors first. Before you were coming into the Veve app. You are, if I can say that in a positive way, huge comic nerds. So how did you find your way into Veve? And maybe we start out with you, Sleep in Comics. How did you find your way into Veve after having all these physical collectibles on your wall that we can see right now? And maybe also what made you invest, and did you have any resentments in the beginning against digital collectibles?
Not really. I think Veve and me, I think, are kind of a good marriage, mainly because I'm pretty familiar with blockchain technologies and cryptocurrency. I did a lot of work with Bitcoin way back in 2015. So I was a very relatively early investor. I think it was around maybe $250, $500 US back then. And so I understood the technology quite well. I had mined Bitcoin. Actually, here in the basement, I had a bunch of servers. I was mining Bitcoin. My family used to make fun of me all the time. But so I was familiar with the technology. Obviously, I've also collected comics for many years. I'm really into that. I love the movies. I love reading the comics. And so when I think I saw a press release talking about how Marvel had partnered with Veve. I didn't know how to say the name correctly, and was going to come out with these collectibles and comics and whatnot. And so I started to get involved with it last year, almost about a year ago. So probably about October. I missed the Spider-Man drop. I missed the Marvel Comics 1 drop, but then I got in shortly after.
So I was in comics before you were in the digital space. That's amazing. I started with the MC1 comic. Crazy achievement here. So giant-sized comics, you have recently joined, and probably this is a little bit different because you had more time to observe this from the outside. How did you feel, or what made you come to Veve, and how did you perceive that? Did you have any resentments before towards the space?
Yeah, so I was really investing in physical comic books, and then all of a sudden I started getting a following. And Dan Schwabel, I think that's how you say his last name, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Veve?" And I was like, "No." And then he showed me, like the platform. And then I went on some drops. Unfortunately, there weren't any big books like Marvel Comics #1. But then I hit the ultra rare AF-15, and that's when I got hooked. That's when I was like, okay, this is an insane platform, and I really like it. So that's when I kind of started to sell my grails, my physical grails, to buy more Veve stuff. So I sold the Showcase 4. I sold that, and I sold the Werewolf by Night 32. And that's, those two comics are huge in the physical world. And I sold those to get into Veve, and I haven't looked back. And now I'm really loving the original art that they're putting out. And I really want to invest in that as well. There's going to be a drop. It's happening right now, actually. It's going to end in like 21 hours, I believe. So if you want to get like an original art cover, I recommend checking that out. But yeah, I mean, I like Veve because number one, storage. I moved, and I don't really want to move 20 long boxes to my new place. Number two is transaction. It's much easier to sell a Veve, comic than a physical, and have to ship it and then risk losing it. And there's many more reasons, but that's my reasons for like really going into Veve.
Yeah. Amazing. And we already see how these stories or which parts come up, like storage. If you look at Corey's inventory there, he recently moved and he had to take this all with him. So Corey, how did you find your way into Veve, and how did you feel about it? Yeah.
I initially found my way into Veve because my buddy kept pestering me about the Veve platform, and I was working out with him 3 times a week in my garage back home. And he was like, Andre Jick, he's talking about this platform and NFTs this. And I'm like, tell me what an NFT is. Like, explain it to me in the most simple terms that you possibly can. And so, he did. And I was like, I don't know. And then one day he came over to work out and he was like, they're dropping Star Wars. And I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars. I was born in 85, so I wasn't part of that original 77 hype. But I grew up with the VHS tapes. I watched them on repeat, tracking to get them to come in. So Star Wars came, I came. And I guess my affinity with comics, and a lot of people improperly classify me as a comic expert, and it's just not true. I started making content for Veve because Designer Con had landed, and I hadn't heard of a single one of those artists. I'm a lowbrow pleb. I don't know fine art. And at that point in time, anything you bought quadrupled in value. It didn't matter. But I'm not a rich guy, and I don't like to spend money just because, it's a guaranteed thing. I needed to know why. And so I started to make these info dump videos just to quickly create a summary of who is this artist, what is the brand. And because comics drop so frequently on Veve, I was making far more comic info dump videos than anything else. And because of that, people are like, wow, you know a lot about comics. And I'm just the proof. If you do the due diligence, you can learn a lot about something in a short amount of time. And so whenever it comes to comics on the platform, I know quite a bit. Whenever it comes to comics in the wild, I'm learning. So that's kind of my background coming to Veve.
Awesome.
I'm learning too.
Yeah.
Same here.
That's crazy coming from you. You have it feels like you have almost every comic that we can find on the app. Probably you have every of those in physical.
No, but I have a lot of them.
But
I'm surprised how many of the modern ones I actually have.
You have a lot of modern ones?
Yeah, I mean, just because I've collected, I only started collecting probably about maybe 5 years ago again, really hardcore. And and so of course I've been able to grab a lot of the modern ones, copper, bronze, because they're just not as expensive. Once you start getting into the silver, as a lot of people know now, it starts getting quite spendy. And so I've gone back and been able to grab some of those, and we'll see some of those, and we have seen some of those on the app. We'll see some more, but some of them, just like the first appearance of Groot and other things, they're just really expensive books. And for me, there's other ones I want to get before that one. So for example, I don't own Journey into Mystery 83. So that's the first appearance of Thor. So that would be one I would want to grab before I would probably grab Groot.
Okay. It's not out yet. But speaking of that, when you are coming to Vivi or when you're logging in, what gets you most excited about those comics? Is it the cover artwork? Is it getting a comic that you normally cannot use, or or are you trying to match physical and digital that you already have? So I think everyone is there for a different purpose, right?
Yeah.
So
Do you want me to go first, or should we go
yeah,
around?
yeah, go first. Go ahead.
Sure. I think initially it was just, I do have a lot of these first books, so it was this kind of matching deal. And then I think for me, because I didn't quite understand it, it was more of a pure investment perspective. Like, I didn't care. I already own half these comics, or more than half these. I don't need them in the NFT space. So it was a pure investment perspective. I'm going to put in this money, and how much money can I make? And back about a year ago, that was actually, you could do that. Now it's a little bit more difficult, right? But over time now, I've actually really liked collecting the digital aspect of it. It is much easier having it in your phone. I'm not so much, I know a lot of people have said they can read them. I'm not so much into that because I have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, which is a service where you can go in there and read full runs and other things. It's really tough when you just read one comic. I only do that because I can't remember something. I want to go back exactly to that comic and look up if it is the way I think it is, because half the time my memory is bad and I can't remember. But Marvel Unlimited allows me to do that, right away. And as you know, a lot of my comics are in these plastic slabs, so I can't open them up even if I wanted to, sadly. So for me, it was initially more of an investment perspective, and it still is an investment perspective, but now it is fun to have some of these, match them up with my existing. And like Marvel Comics 1, I'll most likely never own that in the real world. So it's just fun to own some of these ones that are just super, super rare, really hard to find. And then they have the unique art. So that's cool too.
Giant size. What gets you most excited?
Yeah, so I usually
about the
yes, like I just buy secret rares. That's all I really look for. I love the scarcity aspect. I literally have 10 links on my computer for what I want, and I just refresh it every morning and every night just to see if the price has decreased. I know it's sad, but that's just how I am, and I want the best deal possible. So only secret rares. I'm looking at ASM 300. I just bought one more today. I put it on Twitter, and now I have 5 out of 250.
Crazy.
So I'm just trying to build that as much as I can. So that's my thing. And by the way, I have a lot of omnibuses, which is kind of ironic because I don't want 20 long boxes, but I like the physical form of reading the comics. But with slabs, you can't read it. Like, just like Sleepin said, there's no real point in having it except just to look at it on your wall, like you. So that's why I love omnibuses. And if I move, I'll have one big box and that's it. Just an easy move instead of lugging 20 long boxes. So that's what I do. Just secret rares and that's it. I'm not really messing with commons or uncommons right now, but that's just my strategy personally.
Wow. Corey, how do you feel about this? Are you also aping into secret rares only?
It's interesting because I think the more I learn about comics and the people that are very interested in comics, I had a perception whenever I first came, and that was based on conversations with people who collected physicals, that the commons would be what people go after. And then as more people navigated to the space, I heard more physical collectors be like, but these exclusive covers, we got an exclusive cover from Mark Bagley. That's a major Spider-Man artist. Now we're getting 1-for-1 exclusive covers from people like Humberto Ramos. Is super major proofs. And then if you look at those secret rares, they're not tagged as exclusive, but they're an interior panel. 99% of them are an interior panel pull from the inside of that comic. Essentially, you're getting an exclusive cover from the original artist of that comic book, which is a very major thing to think about. And so it's funny because drops came, and for the longest time, I was happy with anything but an uncommon. No one I've talked to in this space, a few people, I can't say no one. There's a very few people who are like, I love the uncommons. And usually if they do, and uncommons, in case you're just completely unfamiliar with the platform, an uncommon usually is a color selection. So you have the common cover, and then maybe they just highlight whatever the first appearance character is and the title, and everything else is black and white. But a new thing that's happened, and I'd be interested to hear what you two think of this, is we had a 1-of-1 from Scotty Young release on the platform, an artist proof. ever since that 1 of 1 from Scotty Young has released on the platform, our uncommons have been from Scotty Young. We're not getting a color selection anymore. We are getting a physical replica of a variant that exists in the real world as our uncommon. I'm curious, do you all think, potentially we could start seeing more 1 of 1s from like McNiven, Ramos? Do you think part of the contractual thing that they're doing is enabling them to put some of their artist-owned proofs onto the platform?
I mean, I think with modern comics nowadays, there's especially the ones that they're selecting, which tend to be ones that are, you know, first issue of a run or have significance. And once again, we're in the modern era. There are cover variants, and so they often have a selection of 5, 6, other than the cover A, which would be considered the common, the general one that they can select from. And it's interesting because, for example, take Venom 3. They did use some of those different ones, and then they actually used like the second print and the third print. So that was kind of interesting, right? Not even variants of the cover A. But if you know that comic well, you know that the third print cover is the kind of go-to cover for that comic. So that's why they chose that as a secret rare, in my opinion. So they've got a lot of variety of different, choices in the world of for the modern stuff. But once you go back, now there's no variants. So they really have to figure out what to do. And that's where you're seeing the rare and the ultra rare. They're commissioning art from, a variety of different artists. We've seen that. And then they are pulling the secret rare from an interior panel. So I think you're right, though. I think there is some relationship now between some of these bigger time artists, perhaps, and, because they can choose all these different covers, but they're choosing covers and artists that the community knows about, I think.
Yeah. Very interesting. And when we are already at the discussion, because we had now heard that Giant Size is only investing in secret rares, but I have heard the other side. The only original cover in that sense would be the common, and we have seen for AF15, for example, that the common is holding very stable, still above 400 gems. So either someone is stacking like crazy, or people are just holding on to that one grail, which brings the question: commons, does it make sense, or what does it depend on, or should we go for secret rares, or maybe even ultra rares? I don't know. What's your take on this? I mean, I would ask you Giant Size, but you would say secret rare. Yeah.
I would say it's based on editions. So with AF15, there was 10,000 that were released and 6,000 commons. It's based on character. Spider-Man is the biggest character, of course. So if X-Men 1 came out and they made 10,000, let's say, overall, that's going to be that's going to be probably like $300 for a common. So it's really based on the book and the characters. Other than that, like, let's say, I don't know, ASM 300, right? That common is like what, $40 now? By the way, I bought that at 58. I had a little bit of FOMO, but now I only focus on secret rares for those kind of books that aren't that big. Now I don't have an AF15 common, and I really considered it at $400, but I just rather stick to the secret rare just because it's very rare to find. It's just for AF15 it's only 250 of them. So if you have one of them and it's worth, I don't know, 11,000 now, it's like kind of fluctuating a lot. Your money is way more liquid at the common level, of course. But if you're a real VV person and like you're not going to sell it quickly, if you really want to hold long term, then I think the secret rare is the way to go. Honestly, all of my comics that I have are secret rare. So I'm just holding for as long as I can, and that's really it. That's how I do it.
So you're not going to take profits on the way up from your stacks, or?
I'll just wait. I mean, some people like to buy a lot of commons and then just sell it as it goes up, but I just rather just hold on for a little bit and just see how it goes. That's really how I think about it.
Well, my strategy is I buy, and then I buy one of each because I want to collect the common cover. So I secure, it's 2 gems. I secure one common here, one common there, and then I find myself with a 200 something comic collection of different mints, and I don't want to let anything go. So I made everything wrong that Sleepin told in his strategy video. So everything wrong. I need to stack. I know. How do you approach this, Corey?
I don't really have like a crazy strategy, to be honest. I look at everything on the platform, whether it's a comic or a collectible, and I try to look at it as if you were judging a business and you were going to invest in a business. So I really do look at the historical significance of what it is, the physical. Comics are unique. Todd McFarlane's Batman on the platform, its physical replica doesn't make any sense if you try to associate the physical value with the VV value, right? But comics, on the other hand, they're intrinsically tied to it. And it's interesting because Giant Size brought up, the scarcity thing. And look at ASM 252, minting 1,000. And in the real world, it's a great comic. It's got a cool, first appearance of Black. So it's a cool book for sure. But it's not like a top of the charts money raker. But on the platform, it absolutely crushes. So the idea of looking at scarcity as a guide, I think, is a very smart one, especially because the perceptions we have of value aren't proven. They're based on the physical world, and trying to apply those to this space that's figuring itself out. Money and time and the user base, they're going to determine where the value is. But right now, scarcity is just about as much of a sure bet as you can find.
Yeah, I think Sleep and You have released 3 weeks ago a video about the dropping total mint numbers, where you explained that we are seeing now with this bear market that we are undoubtedly in 20,000 comic runs or even less, the 10,000s from time to time, but we are not seeing 60,000 or 30,000 anymore. So and that paired with a strong comic could be the perfect recipe for a boom. Or how do you feel this? And also attached to this, one question: if we are talking mint numbers, do you think it's worth investing in maybe double the money and go for a sub 1K mint? Or is that even relevant? Is that something like 9.8 grade, 9.6 grade? Or how would you sort this?
I think there's kind of two ways to think about it. So there's a lot of questions. Like, we don't know. Like, one of the questions I remember when ASM 252 dropped, when it was only 1,000 copies, what's going to happen? Because people know, they're going to go look it up on Go Collect, and they're going to know that in the real world, this isn't as valuable a comic as, say, Ultimate Fallout 4 or whatever it might be. Okay. And so we're still learning, and the market is ever changing. And so for example, for the longest time, uncommons were worth more than commons, but really after AF15, we've seen uncommons drop and commons are actually moving up. I actually think it will reverse later on, but we can talk about that later. But to your point is that I think that they're just not, the amount of mints now, even at 30 or 20,000, is so limited compared to even physical comic books, their physical comic book counterparts. So the one I always think of, and I did do in the video because I was trying to match it up, was and it's the one I own a lot of, so it's going to sound like I'm shilling it, but it's just the only one that comes to mind, so I apologize. Is Marvel Now .1, the first appearance of Ms. Marvel in costume? Because in the real world, there's like 33,000 printed. So it's a good basis to look at when we used to have 30,000 mints, like Fantastic Four #5 or Ultimate Fallout 4. Those are 30,000 mints. And so in the real world, though, that is a very small print run. And so that's why that comic in the real world can have a lot of value. But here, now that we've even suppressed it more to 20,000, and then as Giant Size, when you start getting down to, so in a 20,000, I think they only have 500. I think it's 500 SRs. And then obviously they keep some.
Yep.
And so it's down to 450 publicly available. And then when you're talking about the 10,000, there's only 225 publicly available SRs. And Dr. Profit's going to buy like 5. So now there's only like actually 220 for us normal humans, And so what I'm saying is the numbers get so suppressed that, and the characters, and you always have to look at the IP, which is something Corey was saying too, is that it's this kind of merging of IP, which is what creates people's kind of FOMO, if you want to call it. And so because if it's a character nobody likes, they're not going to say, I want to pay $11,000 for it. But if it's a character it's this weird merge of it all. And so that's where I do believe we're going to see some of these prices that you just said, they really could spike once we get a couple more people. And we keep saying this, I know, again and again, but we really don't need that many more collectors. I think if you look at a lot of the statistics, you're seeing, maybe 5,000 active people in the app on a regular daily basis. Maybe 10 to 15,000 people are kind of really, really, buying different things now. So, obviously this app is in Europe, it's in Australia, it's in Asia, it's in United States. To grab another 15,000 people doesn't seem like it's that hard. So that would if you were to double the amount of users, these prices, I think, are going to change quite a bit.
I completely agree. And I think we all agree that during a grinding bear market like this, it's hard to find people that want to throw spare money into collectibles that have a downtrend since 7 months or so and always breach new or get to new lows. But speaking of that, maybe giant size or Corey, what if we are looking at a bear market like this and people get frustrated and they want out, or they get scared, even some get scared because they think it's going to go to zero basically, or it's all a scam. So what could we say to the people that are now sitting with, like, let's say 50 comics in the app, don't know how it's going? How is your vision, giant size, for the long term, or for the next 3 to 4 years, let's say?
Sure. So I believe that Veve will still grow. I mean, they're going to New York Comic Con. They're going to be present, like just like Whatnot. Like I was actually a seller on Whatnot, like 2 years ago. They're present on every single Comic Con, and Veve will be there too. And just like Sleepin' and I, we actually spoke on the phone a couple of days ago. He said once people keep seeing Veve and they keep saying, "Oh, it's a scam, it's this and that," they'll keep seeing Veve, and then they'll eventually just break in. They'll just be like, you know what? Let me just check out this platform. And let me jump into it. Essentially, let me get a common here and there. And that's what I did, honestly. I bought commons at first, and then I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I started getting into secret rares eventually, because I didn't go in with like $5,000, like, oh, let me just get a secret rare. No, I went in with like $10, and I was like, let me just see how this is. So I believe that there's still a lot of growth potential for sure, but especially at Comic Cons, more comic book collectors, physical, are going to see it, and they're going to be like, okay, this is actually a real platform. And people are actually there talking to people there, and it's going to grow from there, I believe. And I believe once physical comic book collectors come onto Veve, they're going to love secret rares just because of the scarcity aspect and everything else. I just think it makes it a much easier way to collect collectibles, essentially. So that's what I think.
Okay.
I think for me, the most, if you want to call it, bullish sentiment has been in regards to the one-of-one auctions. And I was lucky enough to get to talk to Peach Momoko whenever she released her Ghost Spider #2. Is that right, guys? Whenever she released that, and I spoke to her via messages, and that was via my wife, Heather, the other half of my team. And we had asked her, you have had previous variants on the platform. Did you have any say in whether those were used or not? And essentially, she was given a notice, from Marvel. We're going to be utilizing this. And it was probably because that was from her run. I think she did 25 variants for Marvel initially. She was discovered at a con. And because those were probably a freelance, they owned it. But for the one-of-one, she was contacted by both Veve and by Marvel, and she was asked to pick which one she wanted to release, and further, that it would become unavailable anywhere else. This would be the only place you would be able to get that one-for-one variant. And Peach Momoko is a big deal, big deal artist, a huge following. And whenever I hear conversations from creators that go like that, it just makes me feel like there's a big picture plan in place. And I feel that way even more so since Scotty Young has started rolling those uncommons as physical. There's something happening with these one-of-ones. Another good example, who's the Wolverine 107 artist? I'm completely blanking. Someone help me. Bone Claws for our one-of-one. That cover.
I cannot help. I'm completely.
Gosh, he was a letterer at DC at the age of 12. His brother Andy, Adam Kubert. There we go. Andy, Adam, and his father Joe. Legendary trio of artists. Okay. And whenever his one-of-one released on the platform, 2 days prior to that, he made a post on Instagram saying that my physical original works will no longer be available in public markets. Another massive indication from a massive artist that something exclusive is happening specifically with Veve. Where was Veve at the last San Diego Comic-Con? In the Marvel booth.
Yeah.
This relationship, all new Ghost Rider,
Right.
some of these comics that we're getting, they're brand new. All New Ghost Rider isn't a good example, but some of the comics that we're getting, they've published the month before. So not only are we getting these Silver Age Grail comics, Veve's also becoming like the publishing arm for Marvel NFT comics current. So all of these things together just makes me feel like Marvel and Veve have an understanding, and 5 years from now, there's going to be one place where you're going to be able to get, Veve or digital NFT comics from Marvel. It's going to be Veve. No one else is going to do it. Whether they get other publishers is unknown. It's all speculation. But I can say with pretty good certainty, with 95% certainty, you're not going to find a Marvel comic anywhere else in the future other than on Veve. That's my strongest argument as to why you should stick around if you're purely into comics.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sleepin, you said before, once people are coming in, and you said it a little bit with a smile, because obviously if we say it on YouTube, then 1 week after, people are, yeah, where are you people that you said would come in? Yeah. And then we also had the Comic-Con. I think there's another Comic-Con coming up right now. And people were, after that, Veve Fox and the other data analysts were analyzing how many people did we get. And it was basically flatline, because obviously adoption doesn't work in that way and doesn't work so fast, especially in the current situation. What do you think, or what do you all think, but maybe starting with you, Sleepin, is necessary to bring these physical collectors that are running around at Comic-Con in? Because only being at a booth probably will not do it. But what's missing for them? Are they too much analog, or?
maybe, right? I mean, I used to think that way too. I mean, I actually think the amount of people who collect comics is a relatively small amount of people. I always think it's around like 100, maybe 150,000 people worldwide. It's not, I mean, Veve, once again, I don't know their numbers. We don't know their numbers, but I think at its peak, there's a lot of activity. If you go back and look at some of the other users, I mean, we used to have like maybe 25,000 people on a regular basis that were buying things, on a daily basis. So even if we were to get, now these are pretty crazy fans and would be willing to spend money if we could get some. So I don't know if they're going to make that jump. The first jump is they've got to get past the fact that they think it's a scam. And the reason why they thought it was a scam is because you couldn't get your money out. And so, I mean, really, if you think about it, we've only had cash out for 2 months.
Yeah.
60 days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's just each hurdle has to be broken down in their mind. It's like there's these barriers and they have to be broken along. And, and the fact, and even if they're like, okay, you know what? Cool, I can get my money out, but I think it's kind of a scam. How long has this thing been around? Well, before it hadn't even been out a year. So are you going to spend $10,000 on something that hasn't even been out a year? You have no trust. You don't understand the technology. See, it's just, so to a certain degree, time, and what Giant Size was saying, seeing them again and again in the Marvel booth, what Corey was saying, seeing these big time artists, because a lot of physical comic people do have their favorite artists. They do follow their Instagram or Twitter, and they read that, and they're like, and once again, it's this constant barraging of them, this Veve digital, and they hate it, they love it, whatever. But either way, I think they will come to accept it, and then that's maybe they will give it a try or they won't. But I still think, even in the best case scenario, you get 50% of them. It's the 25,000 users that we had back in January, that the majority of them were not physical comic book collectors. They're just new people excited about the space and became comic collectors. That, if you project that forward, is what's exciting. And so maybe you do pick up 10,000 of these comic book collectors from the old physical world, but then you gain, 25,000 you just start adding these numbers, because the numbers for Veve user base is so small, in my opinion. Once again, 5,000, 10,000, it's not hard to double 5 to 10,000 users. The problem, of course, is that we're sitting in this kind of crazy, weird global recession thing, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's tough to be patient, but I mean, and of course I'm an extremely biased person, but that's what I see.
I think
If I may
we all
add
are.
something, an interesting thing that I didn't realize, because again, not a physical collector and not for comics, but I was kind of researching the CGC, and they didn't even start grading comics until the year 2000. That's a relatively new thing. It's only been around for 22 years if you think about it. And if you think about the value of some of these Silver Age comics, you know, Spider-Man's birthday, you know, 1962, right? Like, so 60 years. And so these things have taken a huge amount of time to get to the point where they had value. I promise you, in the year 2000, when CGC started throwing comics into slabs, people were like, that's baloney. Who are these people? Who do they think they are? Who do they think they are assigning these values? This isn't real. That's not what they're. But now, 22 years later, there's a few grading authorities that have mass adoption that people have globally accepted. CGC is one of them. And if you think of Veve in that terms, like in terms of the roadmap that Sleepin was kind of talking about, we're like CGC in the year 2000 or 2001. You know, we're 1 year in to establishing this is a legit thing. It's a legit service that's being provided.
Giant Size probably remembers there's like, I mean, there's been at least 3 or 4 times that I can remember, not 3 or 4, but at least 2 times when there was like massive backlash where people were like against grading comics.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I even went to a period where I was like, I'm not grading any of my comics. I want to let them breathe or whatever, you know? So, I mean, it's just kind of, it's this, it goes back and forth, I think. And I think you'll see it probably even, you'll probably see even with digital stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't like how CGC is just opinion based. You can have a comic and look at it and say, oh, it's an 8.0. Then they give it a 6.0 or something. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, I sent in a Giant Size X-Men. I thought it was a 9.0 every day. Like, it was beautiful. 8.5. You know what I mean? And that difference in value was $3,000. And I'm like, oh, should I just send it in again and just get it regraded, take the chance? And it's all opinion based, which is why I love Veve, because you know a secret rare is a secret rare. And there's no one that can say, oh, I think it's this instead. So that's why I kind of got away from physicals that, you know, like recently, because it's opinion based. And honestly, there's a lot of issues with, you know, overall the grading process. Graders have been known to actually destroy the book sometimes. It does happen. For instance, my Giant Size, it was actually a mechanical error. When I got it back, there was a huge dent in the front cover. And I was like, what happened? They were like, oh, I'm sorry, but it probably fell off of a table. I was like, what? So it happened before the encapsulation.
It's a 6.0.
So yeah, so I mean, it does happen where, you know, stuff does go wrong. And when you're dealing with $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 books, it's kind of scary at that point. So that's what I think about it.
Very interesting. And maybe following up on this topic still, how we get people inside. One thing that sticks out to me, and that personally I made part of my strategy, are the Veve exclusive covers. So, I mean, they are there for a reason. And sometimes I have to remind myself that they are officially Marvel issued and not just Veve putting something out without the license. So, yeah. And I would really like to hear all of your opinions on this, because I'm always thinking, if I'm a hardcore collector and I see there are covers, beautiful cover art, even by by these artists that you mentioned that are very, very known, then up to some point I don't have a chance anymore than going there and get the digital ones as well. If I see it's not a scam, they are going together with Marvel. So how do you guys feel about this?
So I think once they get even bigger named artists, it's gonna be crazy. If they, I mean, no offense to some of the ones some of the people that they've chosen, but if they were to get some of the other bigger named artists, and I bet you they will, I think they're gonna. And, you know, like, you don't think Peach Momoko might not be interested now in doing, oh my God, her first exclusive one for an ultra rare or whatever it might be. Number one, it's going to be probably spectacular. And number two, yeah. So I think, and even within the Veve community, they're learning about these artists. If I said Peach Momoko, you know, I've said that before, and it doesn't mean anything to people. They're like, you know, what do you, is that peach you eat? Was that fruit? I don't even know what you're talking about. Right. So, yeah. So, or, you know, if I say Alex Ross, I mean, they didn't know, but now they're learning, right? And what's interesting is they will say to me, "Oh, I really like this artist." They'll DM me, "Can you tell me more comics?" I have a guy who just went out and went crazy on Trad Moore, and I like Trad Moore. Trad Moore is the guy who did Silver Surfer Black, very distinct. And that guy, I really like that artist. And I told him all the different comics, some of his initial. He did his own. This guy went ham on it. He went crazy. Keeps on sending me these pictures. So I mean, that's where. Yeah, so I think some of these VV exclusive covers are gonna. I mean, they're already pretty popular, but I think they're gonna be even more so.
Giant Size, what do you think about VV exclusive ones?
So me personally, I just love the original art. So I'm actually an original art collector. I buy art every week, believe it or not. I buy interior pages because the covers can go for crazy money. Is honestly what I love about VV is that you can get a pretty good value. Like the last sale, I think was like what $5,600. A cover, like a physical cover, would go for over 10,000 usually, right? I went to a con, I saw some covers for 25,000, 18,000. So it's very difficult to get a really solid cover at a good deal because these dealers know what they want. They know the market really well. It's very difficult to find a cover for sale in the market that is not undervalued, let's be honest. So for me, I just love the possibility of these great artists just making, these covers and just putting it out there because honestly, it's a great value. So that's why I like it personally. So yeah, I just love the original art aspect. I'm definitely going to be bidding on this one that's going to be finishing up soon. I just love covers. I actually sold one a couple months ago to this guy. So my father actually bought it in the 90s for $350. Believe it or not, this guy, he really wanted this cover. He offered 52,000 for this cover. Right?
I mean, the thing is, they're one of ones.
One of ones. So if
I'll tell you this. You know Comics and Crypto?
Yeah.
One of his friends, you may know us, owns the one of one original cover art for Ultimate Fallout 4.
I think I know that person.
I don't know how much it's worth, but it's got to be worth a ridiculous amount of money.
It's over $1 million. I mean,
Yeah,
the last
sure,
sale was in 2014, and it sold for around, I believe, 600 or something like that.
I was just amazed because even obviously, to me, I don't even think normal humans own these types of things. They're only owned by aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I got it mixed up with ASM 300 because he has that one too. He has ASM 300 and he has UF4, the same person.
Oh my gosh, amazing!
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, like the recent Frank Miller cover art, the Batman, sold for 2.4 million.
Yeah.
So it's like deep pockets that are loving original art might go on Veve and say, hey, this amazing cover that I really want, one of one, I'm willing to spend. Look at Dr. Profit. I think he spent 31,000 on an ASM 1 recently, right? So I think the original art is going to bring in a lot of big collectors that have deep pockets, and they may be willing to get into secret rares and putting in more money into Veve.
Now you're making me feel bad. I didn't bid on that Ghost Spider 2. I actually think I bid, but I just bid like the minimum, whatever. I should maybe I should have gone for more.
Yeah.
I've always thought the potential of the exclusive art paired with the animation, like we see on some other platforms, like Terra Virtua is a good example, and they have some really exclusive artists there, like J. Scott Camp, like some major artists. But I truly think the moment that we start getting animated exclusive arts, even from we talk about tiers of artists, and there's the artists that we're all kind of talking about that we all know. But if you look at some of the artists that we get consistent exclusive art from, they're on the covers of every comic that's publishing right now. A good documentary to watch if you have Disney Plus is Marvel 616, and they talk about artists. And they talk about artists from around the world because Marvel has a very global approach to how they're doing art now. And a lot of that is tapping into different artists from around the world because it gives their art a lot more robustness. A person that draws a cityscape for Spider-Man that's from Rome draws a different cityscape than the artist that's from New York. And that adds a lot of depth and environmental context to the books. And so when you look at like Rochelle Rosenberg is a really good example. The Mandalorian #3 comic that just came out has a beautiful variant. She's the colorist for it. And so while these artists are putting out a lot of work, they just haven't had enough time out there and put out enough, I would say, iconic covers tied to iconic key comics to really establish themselves as major name brand comic artists. But that could change. They literally could change at any moment. You know, Avengers, 1 million BC just released, and they retcon Thor's birth story. However you feel about that, it's a major tide change for Thor canonically, and what's going to happen with him in the future of comics. And, you know, there's a Scotty Young variant for that. I'm pretty sure there's a Rochelle Rosenberg. She's usually not the core artist. She's a colorist, but I would encourage you to look at every time, and I mentioned that in every single info dump for that reason. And I try to link the artist bios. Just take a look at what they're doing, not just in Marvel, but outside of Marvel too, because we live in a mass media world where you could be an artist for Marvel, but you also could be producing animated movies, shorts. You could be involved in a whole number of other projects, all of which could give you a huge amount of notoriety. But yeah, overall, I love exclusive art for that reason. It's the Pandora's box. You just never know which one of these artists is going to hit it big. You get built-in scarcity, limited edition, rare and ultra rare. We've dwindled it down, and it only exists on Veve. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And probably I represent the average Veve user that just runs around in the Veve market, in the comic market, and buys what looks good. So I bought this thing here, this ultra rare cover from the Torment series. I just liked it, so I bought some. But I have no clue if this thing is worth anything in the physical world or will be. I just saw only 1,050 or so of those, and it looks amazing. So I just bought some.
I think that's what you have to remember is you just should, you know, it's the classic collect what you like. And I think that for people that haven't collected comics a lot, they don't know what they like. That's what but then I'll ask them questions and then they actually do know what they like, but they don't want to admit it because they're so focused on trying to get an ROI. Yeah. And so it's okay if you forget, just pretend like everything was the same price and pretend you weren't worried about that. You know, what artist, what's, you know, like, well, I kind of like this one. That's good. You should lean into that. Maybe you like covers that have action on it. Maybe you don't like covers that have action on it. Maybe you like, so, you know, and so that's the beginning of, I think, creating your own collection, right? And so it doesn't matter. Of course, price doesn't matter. I mean, if you love something that's $50,000, I mean, it's tough, right? But I think that collecting and having things that you just simply like, that's really the basis of it all. The other stuff, you know, it is what it is.
Can I ask you guys a question really quick, just from your perspectives as, you know, more long-term physical collectors? Whenever we get an exclusive cover for a first appearance character that isn't even mentioned in the original comic, I think Marvel Premiere number 21, Misty Knight's first appearance comic, she isn't even on the front of that book. Doctor Strange's first appearance, not even mentioned on that original cover. Whenever we get an exclusive cover, and of course they feature that character, do you think physical collectors will look at that and be like, hey, you know, they did good by Doctor Strange, they put him on a cover, I like that? Will they assign value to that monetarily, or is that just kind of a cool thing to you guys?
Go ahead, Giant Side.
Okay. So everyone hates Strange Tales 110's cover, right? I used to have one in a 7.0 CGC. I hated it. You know what I mean? It's cool to say that you have it, but it's just one of those covers that he's just not even there. You know what I mean? So to have him on the secret rare, even the secret rare cover, I don't like, to be honest. He's just like this. I just don't care for it. But I really do believe that people, like collectors, really want the character in front. Like, for instance, AF-15, Spider-Man, right there. X-Men 1, you see all the X-Men. You know what I mean? So it really does add value. A lot of people told me, like, they actually compared Strange Tales 110 to Daredevil 1. They were like, listen, it's roughly the same value in the physical world, but Daredevil 1 has, like, more, I don't know, like, more people want it because it's just it's a better cover, let's be honest. But if Strange Tales 110 had Doctor Strange in the front, that, it'd be way higher than what it is right now. So of course the cover does matter a lot for physical collectors, and if the character's not in the front, like on the cover, I kind of stay away from it because I know that there's less demand for it. That's what I think.
Marvel's played this game, and if you collect physical comics, Giant Sides know exactly what I'm talking about because they know this over the past, really, I think 3 years. I've seen a lot of it. Is that they know, so they come out with a new character, they do not put it on the front cover of the first print intentionally. So the book sells out because everybody's excited about that comic because it's the first appearance of this character. And then on the second print or the third print, they will put the cover and have the character on the cover to sell out the second or third print. And in a lot of cases, because they're shorter print runs, the second and third or fourth or fifth or whatever print, those books become more valuable than the first print. And so it's something you really need to watch for. I did a video on this a long time ago, but if you, it happens, it's a pattern now. Again, and it happens once, okay. It happens twice, okay. But it's basically happened at least like 10 times over that I can think of over the past 3 years, in which maybe even longer. I get all the years messed, they all jumbled together. But yeah, so you'll very often see that. And when you're collecting, you know how we focus on the FA, which is important, but if you also will look, because they're not always on the front cover, you'll find another big key comic for that character would be their first cover appearance, which might not happen for another 3 or 4 comics.
Yeah, actually, Veve is doing the same in a kind of way. If you look, first Star Wars ship is not
Right.
the X-Wing, it's the TIE Fighter and some scythe, right? So the next drop could be then something bigger, and everyone is like, yo, this is the real one. So
yeah,
I see that strategy.
I don't blame them. They're all trying to make money in the end. They're businesses. They you know, they're going to use whatever they can to their advantage.
We want
right?
them to make money, so
Yes,
they
we
can
do.
build something better for all the collectors. I think the perspective that Veve shouldn't do money and only people should do money is completely wrong. We want Veve to have so much money that they can build Ready Player One, metaverse, or whatever people speculate it's going to be. So at least that's my perspective, and they will. All ships will rise with that tide. Yeah, I think so. But speaking of rising tide, there is one concern that I have, and I really would like to get your opinion on that one, specific on comics, because I have only a couple of weeks ago, I thought, how many Marvel comics are there? And I Googled it and fell off the chair because I think it was 27,000. So if I imagine that you get like 27,000 comics on the app that all go with 30 to 50,000 editions and cover variants, and I don't know what, could be pretty diluted. I mean, still 27,000 different comic types for 50 million users would be still not very much, but how do you think they will bring all of them eventually, or?
I mean, I think that's pretty difficult, right? They're dropping 2 a week, 3 a week sometimes. Sometimes they do a run, so it'd be 5 a week. You know, probably not, right? They're probably going to do 2 to maybe 300-400 a year. They're obviously dropping the key ones at the key times. And so I think we'll see that for the first 4 or 5 years. I'm okay with there being, let's just say they dropped whatever. Let's just say they dropped the entire Daredevil run. You know, not the entire, but let's just say they dropped 1 through 100, okay? And they dropped 20,000 of each. And yeah, there'd be a ton of them that would be worth under $1. And I'm okay with that. There are comics in the real world that are worth, you couldn't sell them for $1. But it's okay. I mean, people collect them. It's part of their run. So what I have a bunch of comics, you know, in the next room that aren't worth $1. I couldn't sell them. So I would bundle them up. I'm trying to think of a run. I have a bunch of runs. Okay. Immortal Hulk. I have 1 through 50. Okay. That's a relatively newer run, but it's a kind of popular run. A bunch of those comics I couldn't sell for $1. Some of them you could. But if I bundle them up as Hulk, Immortal Hulk 1 through 50, and I sold them on eBay, I bet you I could get $500 for it. Because a couple of them have some value, maybe not 500, but you know, I could get some money for it. And that's how you would do it. I think in the future, if you could sell comics in sets, I think people are going to want to collect them. But any individual one, yeah, you could probably buy it for 50 cents or something like that. I think that's okay. You're not always gonna, but here's the interesting thing that happens in comics is, I'm trying to think of one offhand. I'll think of something. Anyways, weird stuff happens in comics or in movies that suddenly makes a comic that was worth 50 cents explode. You know, so I can't think of one. I can't think of anything offhand. Okay. But here, you wanted to show a comic, so I'll show you this comic.
Yeah.
So this is a comic with Cosmic Ghost Rider with the Infinity Gauntlet. Never has happened. Probably will never happen. This is a worthless comic other than it's a cool looking comic. Okay. But I mean, What happens if in some weird movie or some weird timeline or whatever, the cosmic Ghost Rider suddenly gets the Infinity Gauntlet? This comic might go from being worthless to being a lot. And that's kind of the fun of comics, is that, you know, I'm always astounded by some of these comics that I bought just to complete a run, and suddenly it's worth a ton of money.
Yep.
Like, what's the I can't remember the name, where Captain America picks up Thor's hammer. I bought that as part of a run. Like, I might have got that book for $1. Now, that comic's not worth that much. It's probably worth $25 now, maybe $30 or something like that. But that event in Endgame where spoiler alert, Captain America picks up a Mjolnir, that book will always have value now. Just,
I mean, look at Young Avengers 1, right? So my LCS, he couldn't even sell that when it came out.
Yeah.
He said no one wanted it.
Yeah.
And then it hit $1,000 at a 9.8. And then he went to his back room and he found 20. He was like, cool, now I got $20,000 where no one wanted it before. So it does happen where you have a worthless comic, but then it just spikes up just because something happens like that. So yeah, it does happen. And that's why I try to stay away from commons, because of the scarcity aspect, like I said before, where if it does get more diluted, the secret rares will stick out more, especially first appearances like AF-15 or ASM 300. It's going to stick out more than the commons. That's what I believe, especially when it gets more diluted with more comics. Because like Sleepin said, a lot of comics are 50 cents. So it's a possibility, you know?
And then also keep in mind kind of the wild card. And I think the people that focus specifically on comics kind of forget about the MCP aspect of everything. But if you look historically, and you know, that's something I like to do, if you look historically at iterations of the MCP, the first iteration of the MCP gave you a bonus for collecting a series of comics. So initially, if you had a run of comics, I think it was 5 or 6, I would have to look to confirm that. But if you had a certain X number of comics, you got additional points. But then they retconned that, you know, they put out, and my initial assumption on why they retconned that is how long would it take? What Amazing Spider-Man has 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 16 covers on the platform right now. And I think that is the most prolific current, if you want to call it a run of comics. ASM has the most of anything else on the platform. And so for you to get any utility from that MCP series bonus, it's irrelevant.
Takes forever.
But in the future, whenever there's, you know, 50 Avengers, 50 ASMs, 50 Peter Parker, all these different runs, if they toggle that back on and suddenly you're getting utility MCP bonus, you know, and those points you can now use to increase your chances at landing, you know, a drop, whether that's a comic or a collectible, it doesn't matter. Those points are good for either for their drop raffle system. That would completely change the landscape of how people perceive the value of a series. It wouldn't matter if, you know, whatever the comic was worth, you know, $5 or less than retail in the market. Just having it for the MCP completion bonus, suddenly this is important. And then also keep in mind, David, you multiple times, you can burn these comics for points. You can burn collectibles for points. And there's no firm. This is all speculation if you've never heard any of this conversation before. But, you know, there's been a lot of speculation, and a lot of different team members have said a lot of different things on how that would happen. You know, we've even heard things like, you know, you burn 10 commons and, you know, potentially something happens. So the burning aspect, the MCP aspect, the fact that there was a bonus for owning a series at a certain point that's no longer here, that could roll out in the future, all of those things could dramatically impact the perception of value for comics.
Absolutely. The burning, actually, we have 2 burns, at least announced, 2 different ones, right? I think the one where you can trade in editions for a prototype, I think, David, you said on Decon. And the other one would be the burning for the MCP points. And both are very valid because I actually, I said this in some of my live streams as someone that is absolutely not in that comic research like you are, but I called the strategy stack to burn. So you would just buy the floor of the 150 comics and just stack them, and either the value already goes up because people are starting to buy them for another reason, then you can sell them off, or you just throw them into the incinerator.
Yeah, I stacked a crap ton of commons. I was buying them under $2. I mean, I bought some under $1. Some of these comics that just sit around, no one cares about. So they had mentioned that long ago. So I think this was maybe a month or two ago. Yeah, I can't remember which ones, but I think I might have bought, maybe 50 of them for $50 or something, or maybe it was $100 or something like that for that purpose.
Yeah. And if we are not the only ones, then it could let the landscape of these, because if you look at from that perspective, we do not have so many comics on the app that if many people do that stuff with the lower ones, and suddenly you can see it in the metadata that, oh, it's 14,000 and then 13. So it's always a couple of hundred less because people really wanted the points for Pokemon or so. Wow, that would be crazy.
And the metadata information is just going to be so essential for us to understand what the actual circulating supplies are. One of the big disparaging things you hear about those original runs of the comics is they were pumping out 60,000 of them. But there was a bot infestation on the platform, and some 30% of users were being restricted on the spot. How much did they have in their vault whenever that happened? How much of these comics and collectibles are locked away in accounts that will never make it through KYC, that are known fraudulent? So us not even having a true reflection of what the actual circulating supplies are for some of these also, we Giant Comics talked earlier about scarcity and how that plays a big role in the perception of value and the actual value. Once the metadata information is released and we have a pretty good gauge on how much of these things actually exist, again, that could totally change the landscape of value for comics on the platform.
Yeah, Giant sized. How many of your secret rares will you burn?
None. I'm just gonna keep them all.
Okay.
I buy just to have it. I'm a collector at heart, investor too. But now that I'm into VV, I just want to hold on to everything really.
In the end, it will be probably harder than we think to burn a comic.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have this crazy idea, and maybe I don't know if it's possible, but to get real collectors into the app that are more attached to the physical. What if Vivi would publish a comic before it even comes out from Marvel originally, in that Phygital sense that they did right now on DesignerCon with the T-shirt and that rabbit thing? You see, I'm not into. I don't even know the names because I'm not so much into the art collectibles. But let's say they would do that, and you had to go to Vivi and participate in the drop to be able to redeem the Phygital if you don't want to buy it secondary on whatever price on eBay. So latestly on that point, if you want to have it firsthand in best quality shipped to your home, then you would have to get to the app. Do you see that chance?
Absolutely. A good comic to look at specifically in terms of Marvel doing something exclusively for the platform would be Amazing Spider-Man 130, the first appearance of the Spider-Mobile, such an important comic. But that comic, its total mint numbers was 5,500. We have no clue how many of those promo codes were actually utilized, and because of that, and it only released as an uncommon, if I'm remembering correctly, and because of that, the floor for that comic is exceptional for what it is. The first appearance of the Spider-Mobile, but that was a really good example of Marvel doing something exclusively for their fan base. I was making info dumps whenever that happened. I have Marvel Unlimited. Like I had access to that, and it flew completely under my radar. People were posting it, and I was messaging people, and I was like, what is this? Like, I'm going to have to talk about this. Can you explain what happened? The more of that we see, especially if they tie it into what you're talking about, I mean, it's going to cause some excitement for people, in my opinion. But that, for me, was the first example of being like, whoa, this is something that they really could be doing because, the proof was in that concept.
They did it with video game. So I think it's called Future Fight. Marvel Future Fight's a video game, and they released 2 new characters, and then they eventually released the comics around that. So there's precedence for that. I think if they if they were to say, like, if you want Iron Man, the next run of Iron Man is only on Veve, I think there'd be like riots. Like the physical comic book community would go crazy, right? Even though Iron Man doesn't sell all that well in the real world. But either way, people would get mad. But I think if they introduced new characters, I think now, once again, it's not going to be like suddenly you have, 90% of, physical comic book, but I think but you might get a couple because they understand, once again, the value of this first appearance. And then of course they would probably want the physical books to come out as well. And the physical comic book people will probably buy those too. But there could be some sort of marriage there in terms of releasing those. And I definitely think that would be interesting and get some more people involved. I bet you they could do it.
Shouldn't be for every of these comics, obviously, but one or two, maybe not so important ones, or at least not yet, could be interesting.
I mean, if they were to release a character and a story, like let's say 10 or 20 comics, they commit to it, it's only released on Veve, they wouldn't have to pay for the printing or anything. It would be pretty. And, this character would end up in the MCU or something like that. Can you imagine? Like, and it's only available on the first appearances, and the run is only available on Veve.
True. Yeah.
Even if they were to put that character in their video games, it'd be pretty crazy.
I mean, comic collectors that go to comic shops, they're very loyal. They have pull lists, like every single week. They go into the comic shop and they have 10 comics, like 10 titles that they just buy every single week, no matter what. So those people, yeah, right. And I used to be that person too. I mean, people are very, very loyal to that kind of thing. So if Veve does that, I believe way more collectors will go onto the platform because they're just they just love seeing a new release every single week. And if it's only on Veve, where else can they go? So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that would be great.
There's high potential for it. Look at Scotty Young's Strange Academy #1. Artist, author, and how many first appearance characters did that comic produce? I don't know. It's a whole boatload. Yeah. But the fact that an artist like him is doing 1-for-1 exclusive proofs on the platform, now his physical variants are uncommons, and he's kind of an artist that's writing these stories. There's the potential for that stuff to happen. I think it's definitely, out there.
Absolutely. And I just want to quickly take a second here to present quickly to the 50 people that are here the channels of the guys that are sitting here. So just so you know where to find them. So we have Sleep in Comics with this channel here. If you're not subscribed yet, then please go there and do that. We have Veve in 3, include him into your drop ritual because you want to watch these info dumps before you take part in an auction or in a comic or whatever. And finally, also sub to Giant Size Comics. He has some really interesting thoughts and topics coming up. And also this year needs to be a 4-digit 1000. So if we can help with that, be there. I'm sure there are a couple of hundred people that will watch this stream afterwards. So please go all over there and sub to him, because also I think the $2 that you can monetize on your videos, you should get them.
You would already be in the thousands, but coming to content creation at this point in time on the platform it's rough. Like I've talked to a lot of new creators, and just got to be patient.
Yeah.
It's tough in the physical comic book. It's worse. Because I did videos two a week for 6 months, and I think I got like 230 subscribers.
Wow.
So, and then I don't know, I must have kind of got some more traction or whatever. And then through that end of that year, that first year, I think I got like another 700 or another like 500. So I was at 700 after a year. So it took a long time. And then I did some else. And then I was around 800, and then I switched over to Veve, and then I shot up because I was lucky enough to jump on when everybody was interested in Veve.
The true reason for the digital comic.
So that was,
It's interesting to see if you look at some of the established creators in the space and you go back through their archive of videos, a lot of them were creating content in their niches. And then Veve came along and they made one Veve video, and that video had times 20 what their normal video count was. And they've established themselves. And that just goes to show you how hungry the collector base is on Veve. there's a lot of talk, you know, everyone on VV is a mercenary. Everyone's here just to buy something and flip it immediately. And that's partly true. I would say a large percentage of people are, but there are a lot of people that are interested about learning about these things, learning the history, and becoming part of those fandoms. And it's exciting on my channel because I only focus on info. Like, I don't do the speculation. So I kind of get a lot of those core, you know, I just love to nerd out and talk about this stuff, people. And it's been a lot of fun.
And that's the thing, actually. A lot of these channels that are, just comic book based, like physical, it's like mostly speculation. Comic Tom, it's all about prices. David's comic book investments, that's another one. I mean, but they've been around for a long time. I think Comic Tom has what, like 50,000 subscribers. He's like at a different level. And then there's Swaggle I think he has like 13,000. So these people have been doing it for a while. Speculation / info dumps too. All great channels, and I actually started off doing that too. I wanted to do physical comic books too, and then I made one VV video, then it just skyrocketed kind of after one video. So after that, I said, okay, this is probably interesting way to go about it, and that's why I kind of switched too. So me and sleeping are kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and that's why I always
Well,
say
I'm
that
glad you're here,
the
man.
physical comic book world isn't as big as people think. It's not like 1 million people. I always say there, print run of Batman these days is like 100, 125,000. If there was 1 million comic book collectors, the print runs of Batman would not be 125,000. They'd be 1 million or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, I mean, honestly, go to a Comic-Con. Just go to a Comic-Con, and you'll see. Like, I thought when I first went, okay, it's gonna be all comics. There's a lot of toys. There's a lot of other collectibles. The comics are in one section, and then everyone else is going everywhere. You know what I mean? So comics, Sleeping's right. I believe that there's not that many collectors. It's not insane. Just go to a Comic-Con. You'll see. Honestly.
Yeah, the performance of your videos from one to another also show the power of the Veve fam, or even of why Ecomi can also be a big deal. I've always gotten the question on my videos, why would you buy a layer 2 token if you can have everything else? And the thing is, it will live off of its ecosystem, because like IMX, you want to be on IMX because IMX connects you to all the other platforms. In the same manner works with Ecomi, and we have already seen it. So there were many projects that tried to tap into this power. So I think Veve is, the more Veve is like this, you see it as a YouTuber, but as a licensor, you will also see it. Like if I go to Veve, it will just explode. Like the artists, when they are mentioned in a Veve post, the followers go up because people just click follow. So there's a lot of power in this community already with a few collectors that we have. Yeah.
True.
Great. So I think we are already 1:15 in. I have some 2 to 3 special questions that I brought from some people that I asked. But what would you want to ask them? If you could, and maybe we just go through 2 to 3 of those questions. If people have questions, they can put it in the chat. I hardly or I ignored the chat so far, but there was a good conversation going on in the chat already. But yeah, so if you don't mind, I will go through this a couple of minutes and then we close it here. So yeah, first question that I got here was AF15 is obviously bigger than MC1 in the comic world, but would they expect that gap to close on Veve, with MC1 being first Marvel comic on the blockchain? Is that so? Is that bigger? I don't know. Who wants to go first? Giant Size wants to go first.
All right, sure. So I actually know the owner of a 9.4 AF15, right? He bought it years ago for $500,000, and now it's worth what? Like with the current market, who knows? But at the time when I used to talk to him, it was like $2 million, right? He believes that's the biggest comic, you know what I mean? And of course, Marvel Comics 1, there's I don't know, like 60 blue labels.
Yeah.
So the scarcity aspect of that comic makes it worth so much money. And also, of course, it's a huge comic, let's be honest. But AF15 culturally is a way bigger book. Everyone knows Spider-Man. So if you're going to be an investor in this platform that you want to just make an ROI, essentially, I'd probably say AF15, especially when more collectors come onto the platform. Now, more physical collectors that are into it for a lot of years, of course, they'll like Marvel Comics 1, because that's like a real comic book collector comic. But if you talk to like more people, AF15 is going to be that book where most people are going to want that instead. That's how I feel about it.
Okay.
I tend to agree with that sentiment, mostly because of, and Sleepin's talked about this before on his channel, and that is anything Spider-Man you should consider as a completely different animal as a franchise. And I heard him say that, and the more I made these info dumps, the more I researched the comics and the lore around it and the artists around it, it's just 100% true. Like, Spider-Man is just a totally different animal, and I feel like MC1 is always going to have prestige on the platform because we got to consider these ecosystems as completely different. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, right? The value of something on Veve, while you could make an assumption of its value based on what's happening in the physical world, that doesn't always hold true. And a lot of it is community sentiment, community hype, and established community sort of lore with it. And MC1 being the first of, in that sense, it's kind of like Todd McFarlane's Batman, on the platform, the first ever NFT, first Batman. And so you kind of have to balance that. But I just tend to agree with a Giant Size in that the more people that come to the platform, they're going to see what the current value floor is for an AF15. They're going to look at that cover. They're going to immediately know what it is because AF15 is always in the news. Comics and crypto, Go Collect, all of these different social media personalities and entities are constantly retweeting, this just sold for a record sale. And that comic sells for a record sale, I feel like, more than any other comic. And at least it gets the most news. Whenever I was doing the info dump for AF15 specifically, there was just the first 3 pages of a Google list were record sale, record sale, record sale, record sale. Whereas MC1, I haven't produced all the info dumps for things that predate me, but I've started the information collection process so I can archive that on my website, which is a whole different other thing. But whenever I was researching that comic, there was less available current social media presence, news articles, and things associated with it to sort of drive the relevance to someone that's maybe new to the space coming to Veve. So that's kind of my take on it.
Awesome. And then we have another question here. Regarding the mint numbers again, I think it's established now that mint numbers differentiate in value between the same editions of a comic variant. How would you value these mint numbers versus the metadata when it's released, bearing in mind the data will reveal the order of minting those editions on the blockchain? So do you think that this influences anything? Because the order of the minting on the blockchain could be different from the actual editions or mint sizes, mint numbers of a comic run.
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, well, let me just clarify. Number one, I would be highly confused if the amount of mint sizes that they released is different than once we see what's on the blockchain. Like, I think those are probably, if they said there's 30,000, there's 30,000.
Not the amount.
Order.
Yeah.
It's the order. So the other thing which has been thrown out, which most people I think know that this is how it is, and plus we made this big jump from GoChain to IMX, and I won't even go into that. But your mint number might be 1, 2, 3, 4, but in terms of actually your order, you might find out that particular token or that one was actually minted last or minted, and so now you're like, oh no, I have a low mint. I thought it was minted first, but it's not. And I've always, I'm a big person that's into like setting expectation, and the mint number has set the expectation that this is the order in which they mint. Now, I think it's pretty much proven that that's not the case. I think a bunch of people have already looked at different things, not in a global way, but just, here and there. And it's not. So in other words, there's even question marks on whether or not when they went and took everything from GoChain to IMX, if they minted Todd first on IMX. So there's even that question that will be answered. And you might get some, the only thing is because we keep saying that Todd is first. And I think Todd was first on GoChain. So maybe we'll be able to manage it that way. But I think there's going to be definitely some, there's going to be some conflict there. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be interesting. The question is, prime example would be like my Silver Surfer number 41. If I found out that that's minted, last, I'm going to be unhappy. Does it matter? I don't know. Now I can't sell it. I don't know.
Probably it matters only to the really blockchain related people, which hopefully in the future will be in a minority, in the sense that if a lot of retail investors come in that only want to use front end without blockchain technology understanding, probably they don't care. They only see the edition number on the comic, and that's fine. Probably the more relevant one. And last question, or it's a question mixture about localization, and specifically for comics. We have seen, I don't know who posted it, but someone made basically a comparison of the comics in different languages. So for example, in Russian and Greek, we probably wouldn't want to have them release a new comic now in Russian, the ASM 15 or AF 15 in Russian or so. Do you think it will be like you can switch the language on the same comic?
It's pretty interesting, isn't it? I actually think that's what they're going to do. I think once they have it, you're going to be able to like just say what you want. It's not like, so AF-15, there's 10,000 of these available. It's not like they're going to do 10,000 Russians or 10,000 in German, I don't think. I think that they're going to allow you, and that is going to be one of these pieces of utility that cannot be replicated in the physical world, and it's going to be pretty compelling. It's going to be damn compelling.
Yeah, we gotta hope it's like that.
I've never seen AF-15 in German. Like I don't even know if it was printed in German, right? Who wouldn't want to see that? That'd be pretty cool.
I would want to see that. But we know from, for example, Pokemon cards, there are only a couple of languages where Pokemon cards are worth something. Because if you get them in Spanish or German, they are not worth as much as in English, for example. The other way round, we have seen collectibles that were exactly the same and have only a new language name, like the poster from Jurassic World. It's like UCI Italy. Obviously, Scarcity plays a role, but there we had the opposite effect. It was not like boo Italy, who cares? People bought this stuff, so it's super interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting they did that too, because the amount of work to change the language on a poster is dramatically less than the amount of work it would take them to change the language in an entire comic, especially like a giant sized issue. You know what I mean? That's a lot of conversion for them to do under the hood.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would also make it possible that my grandmother could read a Marvel comic, because she doesn't speak English. I showed the app to her. And there's another utility piece, because she could take the phone and just basically go on the AR comic so far that she could read the letters. So that was what was good to see. She found that out really quick, really quickly. All right, I would say with these questions, we call it a day. Guys, everyone, thank you so much for joining here in the chat. All the chat action was very good to see on the side. I think you all read some of the comments as well. Make sure that you leave a like on your way out and subscribe to my channel, and then head over to the other 3 channels if you're not subscribed there to do the same. And then you can spend the night watching those videos. And to all of you, thank you so much for making the time to spend 1.5 hours here with me and nerd out about comics. And I hope to have you both you 3 on the channel again.
We'll love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, then everyone have a good night, and I'll stop the stream. Bye.
Bye.